Welcome back to the channel, where history isn't just weird. It's so dumb you'll wonder how humanity survived long enough to invent Wi-Fi and chicken nuggets. Today we are diving into insane dumb historical events in history. Moments so unbelievably stupid, even your phone's autocorrect would refuse to document them. Stay tuned till the end, because the final story is peak historical stupidity. The Great Cat Massacre, when adults thought killing cats was hilarious. In the 18th century, a group of printing shop workers decided that the funniest thing they could possibly do, the absolute peak of entertainment, was to gather up all the neighborhood cats and kill them in a staged performance. This was their idea of comedy. Yes, this was a real thing humans did. Yes, they planned it. They rehearsed it. They performed it like a full theatrical production. Except instead of actors, it was cats. And instead of applause, it was confused horror mixed with 1700s humor. Imagine preparing a dramatic monologue for a show that literally no animal consented to join. They organized a mock trial, complete with judges, prosecutors, and witnesses, all played by the workers, who took their roles way too seriously. Meanwhile, the cats had no idea they were the stars of the world's darkest sitcom. And unbelievably, the executives applauded. They loved it. They laughed. They encouraged it. It was like corporate team building, except instead of trust falls, it was cat trials. Truly proof that HR didn't just fail us, it didn't even exist yet. Historians still argue about what the event meant. A symbolic protest? A class rebellion? A coded joke aimed at the boss's cat-obsessed wife? Possibly. Or maybe, and let's be honest, people back then were catastrophically bored and one sneeze away from inventing stupidity as an art form. Whatever the reason, the Great Cat Massacre remains one of the most bizarre, unnecessary, and deeply stupid historical events ever recorded. And if humanity survived this, we can survive anything. The War of the Oaken Bucket. Italy went to war over a bucket. In the 1300s, the proud Italian city-states of Modena and Bologna somehow decided that the greatest threat to regional stability was a wooden bucket. Yes, medieval geopolitics boiled down to, give us back our bucket or it's war. Not territory, not gold, not a royal scandal. A bucket, a literal wooden water container. Somehow this became the breaking point that launched thousands of soldiers into battle. Imagine explaining that to your ancestors. Nona, we marched for the honor of hydration equipment. And so the armies assembled, knights, infantry, banners waving, all ready to fight for glory, honor, and the world's dumbest household object. Meanwhile, the Modenese soldiers carried the bucket around like it was the medieval version of a championship trophy. The war was brutal. Thousands died. Towns were raided. Entire families were torn apart. All because someone had sticky fingers and stole the town's favorite bucket. Historians still try to sound intelligent explaining this, but deep down they know this was a full-scale temper tantrum. And the ending. Modena didn't just win, they kept the bucket. And to make it even more embarrassingly iconic, they put it on display. It's literally still in a museum, like a war trophy that screams, "We started a conflict, and all we got was this mildly damp container." Humanity, zero bucket. 1. Honestly, this was less a war and more the medieval version of fighting your neighbor, because they borrowed your lawnmower and never gave it back. The Emu War, when soldiers lost to birds. In 1932, the government of Australia made a bold, strategic, completely serious military decision. They declared war on emus, giant, cranky, feathered birds who run like drunk dinosaurs. This was supposed to be a quick victory. Instead, it became the only war in history where humans lost to birds. The plan was simple. Send trained soldiers, real veterans, armed with machine guns, to deal with the emu problem. But the emus had one major advantage. They were extremely annoying. fast, unpredictable, and allergic to being hit by bullets. It was like trying to shoot a feathered motorcycle. Every time the soldiers tried to ambush them, the emus split into tactical squads, unintentionally forming bird platoons like nature's dumbest military geniuses. Historians later insisted the birds weren't actually strategizing. But honestly, even by accident, they were outperforming half the officers. At one point, the soldiers mounted a machine gun to a truck to chase the emus down. The truck got stuck. The emus escaped. Imagine losing a car chase to flightless birds that look like they were designed by a lazy animator. By the end of it, the military admitted defeat. The emus didn't win through cunning, strategy, or clever tactics. They won by simply refusing to die and running extremely fast in random directions. A flawless technique, honestly. Imagine being a decorated veteran and having to explain, "No, I didn't lose to a general. I lost to a bird with a tiny brain and a passion for cardio." And yes, the emus are still out there today, undefeated, presumably bragging. The Great Molasses Flood, when syrup became a weapon. In 1919, the people of Boston woke up expecting a normal day. Maybe some cold weather, maybe a little wind. But instead, they got ambushed by a tsunami of molasses. A massive storage tank owned by the Purity Distilling Company suddenly exploded, releasing 2.3 million gallons of sticky syrup into the streets. It was the first, and hopefully last, time dessert turned into a natural disaster. The wave of molasses rushed through the streets at nearly 35 miles per hour, which for syrup is basically light speed. People, horses, and wagons were swept away like they were props in a slapstick comedy. Except this time, the punchline was death by pancake topping. Buildings didn't just get damaged, some were completely shoved off their foundations by sugar. The sticky flood trapped anyone caught in it, because molasses doesn't just flood, it hugs you aggressively. Rescuers struggled to move through the thick goo, sinking into it like quicksand made by a vengeful pastry chef. Imagine hearing emergency sirens and thinking, "Oh great, disaster, and it smells like cookies." The aftermath was pure chaos. Streets looked like someone tried to frost the entire city. Crews spent weeks scraping molasses off buildings, railways, and anything unfortunate enough to exist near the explosion. And Boston smelled like a bakery for months, which sounds nice until you remember it was mixed with, disaster juice. To this day, locals swear that on hot summer afternoons, the neighborhood still carries a faint molasses scent, a sweet reminder of the day syrup became a weapon of mass destruction. It remains one of the most bizarre industrial disasters ever recorded, because death by sugar tsunami is not something you expect from a city's safety report. Napoleon's bunny attack, the emperor versus fluffy chaos. After celebrating the signing of the Treaty of Tilsit, Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte wanted to relax with a harmless rabbit hunt, a simple, dignified afternoon activity for a man who once controlled half of Europe. So his staff gathered rabbits for him, a lot of rabbits, enough to run a small rabbit dictatorship. But the moment they released the rabbits, something went horribly and hilariously wrong. Instead of fleeing in fear, the rabbits turned, looked at Napoleon, and charged, like fluffy soldiers launching a coordinated military assault. Hundreds of bunnies swarmed him, climbing on boots, jackets, and equipment. It wasn't a hunt. It was a cuteness uprising. The Emperor of France suddenly found himself losing a battle to animals that literally eat lettuce for fun. Napoleon tried waving his riding crop, shouting commands, even retreating toward his carriage. But the rabbits kept coming, relentless, adorable, furious. Imagine being Europe's most feared military genius and thinking, "I may survive Russia, but these bunnies, absolutely not." Finally, Napoleon escaped by jumping into his carriage as the rabbits continued to surround it like fuzzy zombies in a historical horror film. And so the great conqueror of Europe added a new title to his resume, defeated by rabbits. Probably the most humiliating loss of his career. And yes, this was documented by actual witnesses who probably had to try very hard not to laugh. The Football War, A war sparked by a soccer match. In 1969, tensions between El Salvador and Honduras were already heating up. Political issues, land disputes, immigration clashes, actual problems. But then came the 1970 World Cup qualifying match, overseen by FIFA, where both nations decided to express their disagreement the old-fashioned way, by angrily yelling through soccer. The matches were brutal, not just on the field, but in the streets. Riots, vandalism, fights, basically the entire spectrum of this escalated quickly. It stopped being a sporting event and turned into a national meltdown where the referee probably considered just walking into the jungle and never returning. And then, after a particularly heated match, the unthinkable happened. The governments decided to settle the score not with penalties or extra time, but with planes, tanks, and troops. Imagine losing a match so badly your president goes, "All right, that's it. Mobilize the army. We're taking this to DLC-level conflict." The conflict, now famously called the football war or soccer war, lasted around 100 hours. It was short, deadly, and incredibly stupid. A war sparked not because of soccer, but definitely fueled by fans who took the concept of national pride way too literally. Eventually, a ceasefire was arranged and the fighting stopped. But the world never forgot the moment humanity said, "Diplomacy? No thanks. We've got a World Cup qualifier to overreact to." The football war remains the ultimate example of sports passion going so far off the rails it landed in another country. The Pig War, a war that started because someone shot a pig. In 1859 on San Juan Island, things got political because of a potato-loving pig. A British farmer caught an American settler's pig eating his potatoes again, snapped and shot it, and somehow this single gunshot echoed all the way into international diplomacy. Because nothing says global tension like one man's ruined vegetable garden. The American settler wasn't thrilled. The British government wasn't thrilled, the American wasn't thrilled. And suddenly both sides were sending angry letters, threats, and military units like it was the 1859 version of a Twitter fight. Only slower and with more boats. Imagine modern diplomats explaining this. Cause of conflict? Pig. Things escalated so badly that both the US Army and the British Royal Navy deployed forces to the island. Cannons were aimed. Ships were lined up. You'd think they were preparing for the sequel to the War of 1812. Not a dispute about pork and potatoes. Meanwhile, the pig, probably living its best afterlife, unaware it almost triggered World War Zero. Eventually, commanders on both sides realized how stupid this was. After weeks of glaring at each other across fields, nobody fired a shot. The only casualty of the entire war was the original pig, which frankly was guilty of eating someone's dinner. This might be history's only war where the pig was both the cause and the entire casualty list. To prevent future bacon-related international crises, the island was eventually jointly occupied until the border was peacefully settled. And today, the pig war stands as a reminder that human beings, even powerful nations, can be incredibly petty. Honestly, it's impressive how close we came to a British-American conflict because one pig refused to respect personal boundaries. The time the Netherlands elected a dead man. In 1926, Dutch politician Piet de Boer died the day before the election. Literally the day before. Not weeks, not months. 24 hours before voting began. And the entire country went, "Yes, this is the man we want." Everyone knew he was dead. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't a rumor. He wasn't resting his eyes. The man was fully, unquestionably, non-negotiably deceased. And yet, he still won. Imagine losing to someone who cannot debate, speak, walk, breathe, or blink. A man whose entire campaign strategy was simply being dead. His opponents must have had an existential crisis. You spend months campaigning, shaking hands, promising things you'll never deliver. Meanwhile, your competition is lying peacefully, doing absolutely nothing, and still racking up more votes than you. That's not a political loss. That's a spiritual defeat. Government officials then had to pretend this made sense. Imagine the meeting. So, the winner is the dead guy. Ah, great. And what's his plan for public infrastructure? Well, decomposition is happening rapidly, so compost? Ultimately, they had to appoint someone else because, surprisingly, the dead remain unavailable for legislative duties. Historians still debate why it happened. Some say it was loyalty, some say it was protest, others say the Dutch were just very dedicated to the idea of anyone but that other guy. Either way, Piet de Beer became the first person in Dutch election history to win by doing absolutely nothing. Truly the peak of political efficiency. And that, my friends, those are proof that history is basically a combination of bad decisions, unnecessary drama, and humans acting like NPCs, from wars over buckets to international conflict over a pig. We truly are a ridiculous species. If you enjoyed this deep dive into historical stupidity, hit like, smash, subscribe, and comment. Which dumb event shocked you the most? See you in the next episode, where history somehow gets even dumber.